Hello.
Hello, Artemis Pyle. There are not too many people I'd get up at 4 in the morning to talk to. You're one of them.
How are you?
Melbourne, Australia.
Oh my gosh.
Lovely to
Th-
meet you.
Thank you so much for doing this. Melbourne, on our last tour that we crashed, when we had the crash, we were on our way to Sydney.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
No, because I have relatives in Sydney. A man, Pyle, Pyle.
Right.
His name is Proctor Pyle in
Ah,
Sydney.
oh,
So I
we'll
had
do a
no
bit of a
idea I was
shout out.
going to Sydney. And what is your name?
Sandy. Sandy. And my show's called A Breath of Fresh Air, Artemis. It goes out to about 150 radio stations globally, and it's a fabulous podcast. And Lynyrd Skynyrd was definitely one of my all-time favorite bands, and it's a real honor to have the opportunity to chat with you. So I'm very grateful to you for making time for me.
Well, Sandy, thank you. I am honored to be talking to someone in Australia. I love Australia. I was so sad that we didn't get to make it there. I mean, the gigs were booked. We were gonna, go. It was a 95 city world tour, and then I was just talking to someone earlier. They kind of got me a little bit emotional because they were talking about the plane crash and everything, and they asked me a question. I never know when it's going to hit me. I never know when the emotion is going to hit me, and uh, I might be sniffing a little bit.
Well, that's
I,
completely understandable. I mean, stuff like that we tend to relive all the time, don't we? And it's like the death of anybody; it does come back in waves to you. So 45 years later, you may just seem like yesterday.
it does come back in waves, and you're totally right. A lot of times when I'm playing the music, I'm 74 years old, so my band, they're all in their 50s, and they grew up with the music. They play it with respect and honor and accuracy. They play it better than any band in the world. That's why we're doing a tribute album right now. We're working on it for Ronnie Van Zant. Uh, the working title would be Ronnie Van Zant, his music and his band. And we've recorded a bunch of the classic songs: Freebird, Sweet Home, Simple Man, all these. We have Sammy Hagar is singing Simple Man. And we have guest vocalists coming in, and we've got that coming out. We don't have a release date or anything, but we have some iconic people on the album, and we're proud of that. And then, of course, we play live all the time. Um, and we've got the movie Street Survivors,
Yeah,
which I did tell the story of the
yeah.
plane
I,
crash.
I
Have
want
you
to
seen
talk to
that?
you. I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I certainly want to talk to you about it and tell our audiences about it for sure. Let's just back up a little, Artemis, and talk about how you got started with Lynyrd Skynyrd in the first place, because there's a pretty interesting story, isn't there?
Well, yes. That was Charlie Daniels and the Marshall Tucker Band. And I was friends with those guys, and they knew I was a drummer. And Charlie called me one day, and he said, I know of this band that's looking for a drummer. And the first thing I asked was, do they work hard? Because I work hard and I want to work hard. I love setting my drums up, driving my drums to the gig, and now we have tour buses and we have a crew. But back in those days, I just loved it all, and I still do, every aspect of music. And so Charlie said, yeah, they work hard. And I found out how hard. So I remember meeting Ronnie Van Zant in Atlanta, Georgia, at this big stadium gig with all the Southern rock bands, and Lynyrd Skynyrd was one of them. And they had the drummer Bob Burns, and I love Bob. We lost Bob a few years ago at 64 years old in a car wreck, and Bob and I were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame together.
Right.
and he played Sweet Home Alabama, and I played Freebird, and I love Bob, and he was in my band. He was in APB, and
Right.
they loved having both Skynyrd drummers, the real Skynyrd drummers,
Yeah.
and but we lost Bob, and so Ronnie asked me to come to Florida, and the Marshall Tucker guys also helped hook that up. Charlie Daniels and the Marshall Tucker band. So Ronnie wanted me to come to Florida, and he said, I'm going to fly 5 drummers and 5 sets of drums down to Jacksonville, and we're going to have a drum off. And I said, man, that sounds like fun. I said, that's cool. Let's go. You know, and then he ended up calling me like 3 days later, and he goes, look, never mind all that. Just get your drums. And he said, come on down to Florida, and we're going to, you know, I've already been told that you can play drums. Ed King, that co-wrote Sweet Home Alabama, he said, yeah, the guy can play. And my friends and Marshall Tucker and Charlie Daniels, they verified that I was a drummer, but Ronnie said that, he said, they said you could play drums, but he said the biggest thing was they said you're crazy enough to be in this band. And I said,
yeah, amazing. You were considered the wild man of the band, weren't you?
well, they started that, you know, because I'm a vegetarian, right? So Ronnie would say that he'd let me out of the cage and feed me carrots, you know, and they made a joke about it because I did, you know, in my younger days, I like climbing trees and climbing towers and jumping from one car to another car at 70 miles an hour, going down the road, and I, you know, stunts. I like doing stunts, and so they all the places that we played, the big arenas and the stadiums, you know, before sound check and around sound checks, they'd find me up in the rafters, you know, climbing around and rappelling and doing crazy stuff. So yeah, I got that as wild man. But you know, truly the wild man of rock and roll was Keith Moon from the Who, and I was fortunate to be able to meet Keith one night in New York City, and it's one of those things you'll never forget. You know, I got to meet Paul McCartney and Linda. You know, those are things you just never forget. I hung out with Mick Jagger from the Stones, and all of this stuff I got to do because of Ronnie Van Zant
Right.
and his band. You know, Alan Collins and all, and Gary Rossington, Billy Powell, Leon Wilkeson. Of course, later Steve came with us. So I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you're also a very talented guy, or you wouldn't be where you are today. Artemis Pyle, what was it like playing with Lynyrd Skynyrd? How would you describe the band and being part of them?
Well, you know, it was wild, you know, because every show was sold out, you know, and these guys, Lynyrd Skynyrd with Bob Burns, they had made it big before they ever knew I lived. You know, I was still in the Marines, and those guys really, they were like the Go-Go's, the band, the Go-Go's.
Right.
I love them. I talked to Gina Shock the other day.
So did I.
I love them because they, huh? You did too?
Yeah.
I love her. I love the whole band.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Lynyrd Skynyrd, those guys made it on their own. They really didn't have a Svengali except for Ronnie. Ronnie had a vision. He knew what he was doing. He knew how to put it together. And it was his band. It was his vision. And they kind of pulled themselves up by going out on the road and traveling in a van, which I've done many times. I did my stuff that they did with different bands.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
when they came together and did that first album and then that second album, they had already, when I came with them, they had already made it. I didn't make them make it, but I'm a live drummer. and Bob Burns had some medical issues that he needed to take care of. And I always felt like Bob was going to come back to the band and we'd have double drummers. We'd have two drummers. And Ronnie wrote a song called Am I Losing? And that song was for Bob, because it's, am I losing my old friends because of money? And money and the fame and the drugs and the alcohol really drove Bob over the edge. And but he got it together later on in life. He was always a character. Bob was truly a character. And playing with Skynyrd, Leon, Billy, Alan, and Gary, each one of them had these, and Ronnie, of course, and they had these personalities. They were they broke the mold. They all had these really great senses of humor and a lot of talent and a zest for life. And I love that. I love that about playing with this band on a stage with 300,000 people, you know. And of course, I used to refer to them as you guys. I wouldn't say we as a band because I didn't feel like I'd earned it.
You always felt like the newcomer.
The new guy.
Right.
And then when Steve came along, he was the new guy. And Ronnie loved having a new writing partner.
And of course, Steve was his brother, right?
Huh?
Steve was his brother.
Well, his brother by a different mother.
Right.
They weren't brothers.
Okay.
Steve Gaines.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about Steve Gaines. Yes, of course. When
Okay.
I'm sorry, I got confused between Ronnie's brother Johnny, who also came along as a vocalist later on. But yes, Steve Gaines. Unfortunately, we lost him in the plane crash too, right?
Yeah. Steve Gaines. Johnny Van Zant is not a member of Lynyrd Skynyrd. He was not inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay. He's the member of the Judy Van Zant band, and there's nobody in the band now from Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yeah, I hear you.
And so Ronnie had, to me, I met all the Van Zants. Ronnie got 99% of the talent, and he was a prolific songwriter, and he had a mastery, a stage command. You know, you must have a command of stage, and Ronnie had that. And he didn't hoochie-coo around and jump around and wiggle and do all these little dance moves. Ronnie stood there and sang his songs because he believed every word he sang. He wasn't just reading words or memorizing words. He lived every word that he said. And I could feel it because I always had him loud in my monitors.
Right.
And
Yep.
he knew that I had him loud because sometimes he'd take his microphone, and I won't do it, but I can do that really loud whistle. You know, I can do that. He taught me how to do that. And Ronnie could do it. I don't need my fingers to do that, you know. And he taught me how to do it.
Artemis, do you think it was his stage presence combined with the anthemic rock sound that you had? Because it was really groundbreaking, wasn't it, for Southern rock at that time? Was it those two bits that really led to Lynyrd Skynyrd's success, that drew the crowds in from everywhere?
It was absolutely Ronnie's vocal, stage presence, and prolific writing. That those songs were strong then. All of the songs are strong now because, you know, like Sandy, I play this music all the time to big crowds, festivals. No matter who we play with, the Outlaws, Charlie Daniels, before Charlie passed away, we played a lot of shows. A lot of the bigger bands, no matter who we play with, the crowd, they come forward on us and they fist bump and they sing the words with us. We played last summer, like 40,000 people, and they actually drowned us out singing Simple Man with us. It was a phenomenon. And Ronnie did not write hit songs. He wrote hit albums. So everybody knows every word to every song. And each person identifies to Freebird or Give Me Three Steps or The Ballad of Curtis Lowe or Simple Man. The songs mean so much to people because after the shows, I sit for sometimes a couple of hours signing things for people and hearing their stories. They got married to Freebird. They buried a friend. They buried their biker friend, to Freebird. Their high school theme was Sweet Home Alabama or Simple Man. It's the stories are amazing. How the music saved their lives when they were down and out. And I have to say, I understand what they're saying when they talk to me, because being the drummer of Lynyrd Skynyrd has saved my life. Because there was a very dark time in my life where I wanted to kill some people who had made false charges against me. I'm a Marine. I was taught how to kill people in many different ways, but I found out something about myself. I'm not a murderer. I don't want to kill anybody. I love people. So go ahead.
Sorry, Artemis Pyle, when that awful air crash happened, it was because you were a Marine that you realized what was happening before the crash, didn't you? You knew you were going down, and there's a story behind you surviving that crash and running out and trying to get help for your friends. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it's in the movie, and there's the documentaries and everything, and the story's been told. But I'm a pilot. I don't have a current ticket, but I know how to fly anything in the air, and I can run a bulldozer. I can write my name with a bulldozer. I'm a race car driver. I can drive race cars and win races. But what I love doing the most is playing drums. Now, I'm also a horse whisperer. I love horses. I'm an animal whisperer. I have 8 incredible children and grandchildren that I play music with. They're all brilliant in spite of my dumbass. But what I love doing the most is playing Lynyrd Skynyrd music. It makes me feel good to make people happy and see the smiles on their faces and hear the stories. So yes, my Marine Corps training, that I referred to, that taught me how to kill people. I didn't mean to go dark, but I'm just saying I didn't. That's not me. And there were people that said things about me in Florida and did things and stole money that a lot of people have been killed for less. But I realized I'm not that person. What I wanted to do was save lives. So in the plane crash, I used my Marine Corps training to put one foot in front of the other and get to that farmhouse and bring help back to the crash site, which is exactly what I did. And my Marine Corps training helped me do that. And I was injured and I thought I was dying because all my cartilage in my chest had been ripped and I felt like I had internal injuries. So it was important for me to get to help and get help back to the crash site before I passed away. When you see the movie, it's very intense. It's not for children. I don't make any money on it. I gave that story to Hollywood, but it's got drugs and alcohol, bad language, nudity, and the plane crash sequence is very intense. And but it's what happened. I told the story, and I spent 22 hours with the director in Los Angeles, 2 11-hour days, crying, stomping, punching walls, screaming, laughing, crying some more to get it out of me so that he could write a script around what I gave him was the screenplay. And he wrote a script.
So it must have been really cathartic for you, was it?
It was extremely cathartic, Sandy.
Yeah. In saying that, reliving the entire thing again, and I'm sure you've relived it time and time and time again, because you feel Yeah.
every day.
You'd feel the loss of those guys all the time, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And when I'm playing the music, sometimes I'll get emotional and I just play through the tears and then I'll recover, you know. But
Did you have any counseling, grief counseling at all for that?
no, Sandy. Back in those days, nowadays there's grief counseling for everything. Um, Back then, the grief counseling was drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And I lost a lot of my friends to that long after the plane crash.
Yeah.
You know, for just not taking good care of themselves. So that I regret that we couldn't have gotten some grief counseling and somebody to help walk. I needed it too.
Yeah.
I mean, after the plane crash, I was drinking.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I'd be out there drinking and you know, I'm a pot smoker. I smoke weed, but the heavy stuff, all the cocaine and the barbiturates and the speed and all that horrible stuff. I mean, I've watched it kill my friends, and I kept saying, "Hey, just smoke some weed, guys."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
But
has been so part of the industry for such a long time, hasn't it? It's awful.
Artemis,
Artemis,
gotta let me say something.
yeah,
Your name is Sandy.
there it is.
One of my favorite people in the whole world, Olivia Newton-John. She played Sandy.
Of course she did. Yeah.
Movie.
Yeah.
And that movie was released with our trailer. They released a trailer that a documentary guy that did the Pepsi Cola commercials. He was a documentarian, and I think I said that right. And he did a little short 15-minute film, and that film opened up for Grease in movie theaters all over America.
Oh, right. So you were
the connection.
Yeah.
And then we had the plane crash, and they pulled it out of the theaters. But our little trailer, I was riding a horse. I was on horseback, and Ronnie was fishing. Ronnie was in his bass boat fishing, and it was 15 minutes long, and it played before Grease. And you're Sandy and Olivia. So God bless Olivia.
Absolutely.
May she rest in peace.
Yeah.
And I know she was from Australia.
Yeah, she was indeed from Melbourne.
So.
That's right. And here we are 45 years after that plane crash. Time has gone very, very quickly, hasn't it? Artemis, how did Lynyrd Skynyrd get that name? What's the name mean?
Well, I knew him. I became good friends with him. He was the high school football coach.
What, his name was Lynyrd Skynyrd?
His name was Lynyrd, Leo, Lynyrd.
Leonard, right.
Skynyrd, Skinnner.
Really?
But Ronnie and Alan and Gary would be kicked out of school for having long hair. If the football coach, Coach Skinner, saw them in the hallway, he would take them down to his office in the athletic department, and he would cut their hair. He had shears, and he would cut. He did it to everybody, anybody whose hair would get too long. So they, as a joke, changed it to Lynyrd, Skynyrd.
Yeah.
And they changed the name to that,
Oh, that's hilarious. Did he know that it was named in honor of him?
He did later. And I did a few autograph signing shows. The fans loved him. I'm the only member of Lynyrd Skynyrd that showed up at Coach Skinner's funeral. There was 1,000 people at his funeral in Jacksonville, Florida. He was a coach, right? So all the coaches of the Florida Gators and they really loved him, and they all knew him. And there was a lieutenant governor of the state of Florida that came to his funeral. But I was able to attend Coach Skinner's funeral. So I thought he was a great guy, but back in the days, he'd kick him out for having long hair.
Yeah.
So they named the band after him. He loved it.
I
He
bet
loved
he
it.
did. Who wouldn't? That's amazing. Artemis, of all the songs that Lynyrd Skynyrd made so incredibly famous, obviously Sweet Home Alabama is the biggest one. It's had over 2 million downloaded ringtones. It's become a total rock anthem everywhere in the world. And is that the one that you like best, or is there another?
My first song with the band was Saturday Night Special about gun control, and Ronnie believed in that, and it was on a Burt Reynolds movie. So sentimentally, that's my favorite. But since I've lost all my friends, and since the plane crash, every single song is sentimental and close to my heart. Of course, Sweet Home Alabama, we love playing it because every time we start to play the song, everybody jumps up and dances. So it's, I love them all. But Sandy, I got to tell you, I could talk to you all day long. I love hearing you. I could listen to you all day long.
You got to go. I've got to let you go to your next one. I know. So just to wrap up then, Artemis, you've got this tribute album coming out. We don't exactly know when, but there's some fantastic artists that are up front. You've got Sammy Hagar singing Simple Man, Billy Ray Cyrus doing Call Me the Breeze, Ronnie Dunn from Brooks and Dunn out front of Sweet Home Alabama, and Warren Hayes singing Saturday Night Special. It's going to be awesome. We will look out for it. And while we're looking out for that, we will all go to have a look at the movie Street Survivors. Steve Gaines actually wrote 4 of those Street Survivor tracks, didn't he, from the original album? He was the one who did I Know a Little, You Got That Right, I Never Dreamed, and Ain't No Good Life. That album went gold in 10 days.
I love the duet between Ronnie and Steve. It's amazing. But as I said, Sandy, I love them all.
Thank you, Artemis Pyle. All the very, very best to you.